The Roots Beneath Us. 1. The Move. They arrived in early autumn. Daniel and Harper Bell had finally done it, left behind the choking suburbs and noise-choked city streets for peace and quiet. With their 3 children, Ella, 12, Jonah, 8, and baby Maisie, they moved into a weathered colonial farmhouse tucked deep in the woods of northern Vermont. The house was a long-abandoned estate at the edge of government-owned forest land, acres of untouched wilderness, a creek out back, and a view of the hills so beautiful it seemed painted. It had stood vacant for over 40 years, its last owner gone missing in 1976. The real estate agent was vague about its past, said the land was steeped in history. The Bells thought they'd found paradise, but they'd bought a secret, and something in the woods had been waiting. 2. The unseen roots. From the beginning, things were off. The house groaned even when there was no wind. The lights dimmed every evening at 6:13 p.m. sharp. Harper discovered that baby Maisie refused to sleep unless she was held in the basement, something that made her skin crawl but inexplicably worked. Jonah said he had an invisible friend in the woods behind the house. It talks in whispers, he said. It knows Daddy's name. At night, Daniel heard thumps in the walls, rhythmic, like knocking, always 3 times, always around 2 a.m. On the 4th night, Ella woke screaming. She said someone was standing at the foot of her bed, touching her feet with roots instead of fingers. 3. The house on maps. Harper went into town to find a local historian. She needed answers. The librarian, an older woman with milk cloud eyes, hesitated when Harper mentioned their address. "That's the Grathorn house," she said quietly. "Grathorn?" Harper repeated. "A preacher built that place in 1836. A man named Elijah Graythorne. Said he heard God in the trees. Founded a strange sect, the Cult of the Hollow Root." Harper frowned. "Cult?" The librarian nodded once. "They believed that underneath the earth was an older god, one that whispered through the trees and grew limbs into people's dreams. Said it fed on family blood." Harper's skin went cold. "They disappeared one by one," the librarian added. "Some say the house is hollow beneath, like the roots grew up into it. Took the children first." 4. Something in the walls. That night, Daniel cut into the wall to install new insulation, but behind the drywall wasn't wood or studs. It was packed with soil. He dug out a section and found bones. Small ones, child-sized. He didn't tell Harper. That same night, Ella said someone whispered to her through her pillow. When Harper checked the pillow, it was wet with soil. Jonah started drawing strange pictures. Trees with hands, a house on legs, a baby with black roots growing from its mouth. And Maisie. She began crawling into the walls. Daniel found her behind the laundry room, lying on dirt with a flower blooming from the carpet near her head. 5. The forest isn't empty. They tried to leave, packed up the car, put the kids inside, but the road was gone. Literally. Where the gravel path had been was now thick forest, trees that hadn't been there the day before. Daniel tried to walk out with Jonah, made it 50 feet into the woods before he heard his own voice whispering behind him. "Leave the boy. Take root," Jonah screamed. Daniel turned. Jonah was gone. He found him back in his room hours later, dirt in his mouth, whispering a phrase over and over. "The house is hungry." 6. The root cellar. They found the hidden door on day 9, under the kitchen rug, wood warped slightly in the shape of a spiral. They pried it open. A staircase led down into darkness. The air was warm, damp, smelled of earth and rot. At the bottom, they found a stone altar surrounded by 7 empty child-sized chairs. On the far wall, etched in something red and dry, Feed the house, or the house feeds itself. And beneath it, a crude carving of their family. 5 stick figures. One of them, Maisie, was upside down, her limbs drawn as roots. 7. The bargain. Harper begged the house to let them go. In the dark, the house answered. It spoke through baby Maisie, her infant voice suddenly deep, old, wet like roots cracking stone. You are branches. You were planted here. You grow here. One must remain. One must feed. Harper wept. The house offered them a choice. Leave one, save the rest. They refused, and the forest crept closer. 8. The burning. They set the house on fire, drenched it in gasoline, lit it from the root cellar up. The walls screamed, literally. A howling chorus, voices of children, of wood and weeping, of soil being torn open. The house burned. The forest lit up like a beacon. They ran with the kids, ran until their legs gave out. They collapsed at the road, the real road, suddenly there again as if nothing had ever happened. They never looked back. 9. 1 year later. They live in a rental house now in Arizona, but Maisie has started talking in her sleep. Jonah no longer draws. He just stares at his window at night. And Ella? She keeps a small pot of soil under her bed. One day, Harper checked it. There was something growing, not a flower, something with teeth. The house at Marrow Hill. 1. The letter. When Eleanor Whitmore received the letter, she hadn't been back to Marrow Hill in over 20 years. The envelope was cream-colored, thick as vellum, sealed in wax the color of dried blood. Her name, Eleanor M. Whitmore, was written in a narrow, delicate hand that made her stomach twist with uneasy recognition. No return address, but she already knew who had sent it. Her uncle, Abram Whitmore, had died. The letter was from his lawyer. The old house, the one Eleanor had tried her whole adult life to forget, was now hers. She was the last of the Whitmore line. The house and everything in it, including the heavy legacy wrapped in its cracked stone walls and ivy-snarled balconies, belonged to her. The letter ended with one peculiar line. You must enter by midnight on the 13th. He will not wait longer. 2. Marrow Hill. The house stood like a wound against the gray sky. It rose out of the surrounding woods on twisted ground, its 3 stories blackened by time and rot, its windows like blind, watching eyes. Eleanor had seen it only in dreams since childhood, fractured, twitching images that never quite let her go. But now there it was again, tangible and vast. The iron gates creaked open as she approached. Her rented car sputtered uneasily, as if even the engine didn't want to be near the place. Marrow Hill had been built in the 1800s by Eleanor's great-great-grandfather, Elias Whitmore, a man whispered to have dabbled in the occult. Locals called the estate the Hollow House, and few ever ventured near it after sundown. There were stories of lights flickering in empty windows, of music playing at night when the house was empty, of screams heard in the fog. And then, of course, there was Abram. Eccentric, reclusive Abram, who hadn't left the house in 30 years, who spoke to mirrors, who once told a journalist that his reflection had tried to strangle him. He died in the library, alone. The door locked from the inside. No sign of a struggle. Eleanor stepped out of the car, and the wind that greeted her carried a sound, not quite a voice, but not quite nothing. It sounded like a breath caught in a throat. 3. The first night. The front door creaked open with surprising ease. Inside, the air was cold and wet, like a basement that had never seen sun. The chandelier above her, a tangled mess of crystal and cobwebs, tinkled softly, though there was no wind. The entry hall yawned before her, wallpaper peeled in strips. A grandfather clock stood still at 11:59. Eleanor wandered through the house with a flashlight in hand. The rooms were heavy with dust, And something else, something layered, like too many voices buried under silence. In the drawing room, a portrait of Elias Whitmore stared down at her. The face had faded, but the eyes remained sharp, watching. The moment her flashlight beam crossed them, it flickered. She turned it off, and the light stayed on. When she turned around, the fireplace was lit. No matches, no firewood, just a bright, hungry flame, and a woman's voice whispering from inside the fire. "He is not dead." Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She tried. She curled beneath the moth-eaten canopy of the old master bed, clutching her coat. But sleep only brought the dream back, the one she'd had since she was 6. In it, she wandered the upstairs hallway at night, barefoot, drawn by a lullaby sung in reverse. She opened the attic door, walked up, and there, sitting in a circle of salt, was the mirror, the one her uncle was so afraid of, the one she wasn't supposed to touch. She always touched it, and something always reached back. 4. The mirror room. By the second day, the house had changed. Doors were in different places. Hallways were longer than they had been. The library, where her uncle died, no longer had windows, and the mirror room had returned. She found it behind a false wall on the 3rd floor. A door that hadn't been there yesterday, with a tarnished brass handle, warm to the touch. Inside, the walls were lined with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. Oval, rectangular, beveled. Some fogged, some cracked. All of them angled slightly inward, as if waiting for someone to step inside and be reflected 1,000 times. In the center was the mirror, the one from her dreams. 7 feet tall, framed in dark wood, scorched black in places. The surface was a perfect void, no reflection, just endless black, like it didn't reflect light at all. There was a note pinned to the side. "Do not speak your name aloud in this room. He remembers names." She left quickly, but not before she saw something. As she turned, the mirror flashed, just for an instant. And in that moment, Eleanor saw her reflection. Only it wasn't her. It smiled wider. 5. The whispering walls. On the 3rd night, the house began to whisper. It started softly, a murmur beneath the creaking boards and howling wind, then louder. "Eleanor, Eleanor, come up." Sometimes it was her mother's voice, sometimes her uncle's. Once it was her own voice, only it spoke in a language she didn't understand. She heard footsteps when she was alone, scratching behind walls. Once she passed a mirror and saw something following her just out of frame. In the study, she found a journal bound in cracked leather. Inside were pages written in shaky hand. Abram's journal. The house feeds on memory. It learns from you, shows you things it knows you'll obey. Never trust your eyes. Never sleep under the same roof twice. I see him now in the walls, in the cracks between mirrors. He looks like me. He speaks like me. But he is not me. He comes when you remember too much. 6. The attic. By the 4th day, Eleanor stopped pretending she could leave. The car wouldn't start. The gates were chained shut. Her phone had long since died. She walked the halls endlessly, sleep-deprived and shivering. The house was breathing now, expanding, groaning with age and hunger. And then she remembered. The attic. In her dream, that was always where it ended. The stairs creaked beneath her as she climbed. The air smelled of mothballs and old blood. The attic was full of old furniture, rocking horses, stained dolls with missing eyes. And in the center, the salt circle, still intact, candle stubs at the points. The mirror standing tall inside it, just as she remembered. Only this time there was a figure trapped inside. It looked like Eleanor, but the eyes were wrong. Too wide, too aware. It tilted its head, mirroring her exact movements. And then it smiled again. The smile stretched impossibly far. The mirror began to crack, webs of fracture blooming outward like frost on glass. And Eleanor remembered what her uncle had said. Don't say your name in this room. But it was too late. The mirror Eleanor spoke. You've said it too many times now. 7. The truth of Marrow Hill. It wasn't just a house, it was a prison, a seal. Elias Whitmore had been a warlock of unspeakable ambition. He had bound something in the mirrors, a double, a parasite from the other side of the glass. A hungry version of the self, a perfect mimic that could only be loosed when a soul spoke their name too many times in its presence. Elias trapped his in a mirror. Every generation since had been tasked with keeping it locked away. Her uncle had failed, and now Eleanor had come home, right on time, to take his place. But she had made the same mistake. The mirror cracked wide. The other Eleanor stepped out. 8. Epilogue. If you go to Marrow Hill now, you'll find a "For Sale" sign out front. A new Eleanor Whitmore lives there. She's pleasant, though quiet, keeps to herself. She never uses mirrors. If you ask the locals, they'll say the house feels different now. Not better, not worse, just quieter. But sometimes, on windless nights, the new Eleanor stands at the attic window, and her reflection, if you catch it just right, doesn't quite move with her, and it smiles, a little too wide. The Briar Hollow Inn. 1. The last guest. Clara Renshaw had no plans to stay overnight in Briar Hollow. The road trip was meant to be a cleanse, a break from the city, her divorce, her mother's funeral, a way to reconnect with herself on winding country roads far from concrete and grief. But as dusk fell and fog rolled in over the narrow back road, her GPS led her to a detour she hadn't seen on any map. A crooked little sign that read, Briar Hollow Inn, lodging since 1873. The inn sat nestled in a glade of gnarled trees, soft candlelight glowing through lace-curtained windows. It was charming in the way of old things, timber framed with ivy up the sides, a crooked chimney, and a wraparound porch with a single rocking chair creaking gently in the wind. Clara knocked once. The door opened before she could knock again. A woman in her 60s greeted her with a warm, dry smile. You must be tired, dear. Come in. You're just in time for tea. Clara hesitated. I didn't make a reservation. The woman shook her head. You didn't have to. The Hollow always knows when someone's coming. 2. Welcome to the Hollow. The hostess introduced herself as Madame Vell, owner of the inn for over 40 years. Clara was shown to a guest room on the second floor. It was all antique charm, high-backed chairs, brass bedposts, floral wallpaper, and a mirror that seemed just a touch too dark. There were no other guests. Over chamomile tea in the parlor, Madame Vell explained, the inn doesn't get much traffic these days. Travelers prefer chain hotels, but the Hollow has its ways of inviting the ones it wants. Clara smiled politely, chalking it up to small-town eccentricity. That night, she dreamed of footsteps pacing her ceiling. Not walking, dragging. She woke at 3:17 a.m., heart racing. The tea set in the corner of the room clinked faintly, though nothing touched it. The rocking chair outside creaked slowly, and in the mirror behind her sleeping form, something tall and faceless stood at the edge of the bed. 3. A history in dust. The next morning, Clara found herself exploring the inn. Downstairs, she discovered a sunken lounge with faded portraits on the wall. Most were formal photographs of long-dead guests, their names etched into the frames. Harold Van, 1897, disappeared. Margaret Sloane, 1912, last seen entering room 3. Thomas Dyer, 1946, checked in, never checked out. Clara paused. All of them had vanished. Every single portrait described a missing person. She turned to Madame Vell. These people, they went missing while staying here? Madame Vell nodded. The Hollow keeps what it's given. Clara stared. Excuse me? I told you, dear, Madame Vel said gently. The inn chooses its guests. She smiled again, wider this time. Too wide. 4. Room 3. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like someone creeping. The shadows seemed thicker, slower to retreat. The mirror wouldn't fog, no matter how hot her bath. At 2:11 a.m., she heard scratching at the door. She opened it. No one there. But down the hall, room 3 stood open. The room was untouched by time. Cobwebs hung like curtains. Dust coated every surface. But in the center of the room, the bed was made. Pristine, inviting, and freshly turned down. On the nightstand sat a framed portrait. It was Clara. The photo had been taken just hours ago. She was still wearing the same shirt. She stepped back, and the door slammed shut behind her. 5. Whispers in the walls. She ran back to her room. There was no phone signal. Her car keys were gone. So was her phone. When she checked the mirror again, she noticed something awful. Her reflection blinked slower than she did. It watched her. That night, the whispers came. They came through the vents, behind the walls, beneath the floorboards. She watches you through the glass. Stay in the bed and she won't take you tonight. They were all guests once. The bed began to creak on its own. The sheets moved as if something invisible climbed beneath them. Clara screamed and bolted for the parlor, but every hallway led back to her room. The hollow wouldn't let her leave. 6. The house mother. On the 4th night, Clara stopped pretending this was just a nightmare. She confronted Madame Vel, who stood by the fireplace, poker in hand. You knew, Clara said, voice shaking. You knew I wouldn't leave. Vel's expression was neither guilty nor apologetic. You remind the inn of someone, she said softly. It remembered your sadness, your grief. It thinks you belong here. What is it? Clara whispered. Madame Vel looked at the fire. It's a house, and more than that. It's a mouth, built on hollow ground where the veil is thin. The rooms are its teeth, the beds its tongue. Clara backed away. You feed it. I serve it, Vel corrected, as I was chosen to. Before me, my mother, and before her, the inn chose someone else. She looked at Clara. And now, it's you. 7. The guest book. That night, Clara snuck into the office. She found the guest book hidden in a locked drawer. The pages were yellow and brittle. Names filled every line, names with dates, rooms, and red lines slashed through them. The last name on the most recent page? Clara Renshaw, room 7. She flipped to the next page. It was blank, except for one thing, written in an elegant calligraphic hand at the top. Caretaker, Clara Renshaw. 8. The last night. She tried to run. She bolted down the stairs and out into the night. But the forest wasn't there anymore. Just more house. Hallways twisted like intestines. Doors opened into other rooms. Windows showed scenes of rooms she hadn't yet entered. And always, behind her, the sound of bare feet dragging closer. At the center of the inn, she found the foundation room. A stone chamber beneath the house. Walls covered in mirrors, all cracked except one. In that mirror, she saw herself. Older, thinner, eyes gone white. She was wearing Madame Vel's shawl, and she was smiling. The mirror, Clara whispered, "You've been here all along. You just forgot." The real Clara backed away, but something reached out of the mirror. 9th epilogue. The Briar Hollow Inn still stands. A hidden little B&B in the woods. Candlelight in the windows. Soft music on the porch. Madame Vel is gone now. The new caretaker is young, polite, wears an old shawl and smiles gently. She warns travelers not to stay too long. Says the beds are too comfortable. She always knows when someone's coming, because the house still hungers, and the hollow never forgets its guests. Midnight Guest, Part 1, Arrival. The mansion stood crooked and choked in ivy, its tall black windows reflecting the encroaching dusk like dead eyes. What was once grand had long decayed. Its iron gates hung open on broken hinges, and its gardens had become a snarl of brambles and rot. Local kids whispered about it. Adults avoided talking about it. And yet, 4 college students thought it was the perfect place to spend a weekend. They didn't mean any harm. It was just supposed to be one of those creepy little adventures to say they'd done something wild before graduation. Camp in the old Dorsham place, Rachel had said, eyebrows raised as they all sat in the back of her dusty Subaru. That's basically a rite of passage around here. Rite of passage to get murdered, Liam replied with a smirk, tossing a sleeping bag into the trunk. Bet there's just a bunch of mold and raccoons. It's abandoned, Taylor chimed in, the group's self-declared skeptic. Not haunted. There's a difference. They were 4 in total. Rachel, the ringleader, Liam, her boyfriend, and the sarcastic one. Taylor, analytical and annoyingly rational. And Jamie, the quiet one with the camera always hanging from her neck. She'd been the one who suggested documenting the night. Could make a cool video project, Jamie had said. Local legends, haunted house. If we see anything, it's bonus points for creep factor. None of them believed the stories about the shadowed figure that stood in the top window every midnight, about the woman in white who screamed into the chimney. Even if they did, they didn't let on. The thrill was in pretending. They arrived at dusk, driving the winding country road until it narrowed into gravel and spit them out before the towering remains of the Dorsham mansion. The house loomed over them like a decaying relic from some forgotten Gothic novel, its slate roof sagging and chimneys leaning like crooked fingers against the violet sky. This place is enormous, Liam said, stepping out and pulling his hoodie up against the creeping cold. Definitely haunted, at least by asbestos. Rachel grinned, swinging a backpack onto her shoulder. Let's set up in the Great Hall. I bet it's still got a fireplace. The interior of the house was worse than they expected. Wallpaper peeled in long, yellowing strips. The floorboards groaned under their weight. Broken furniture lay scattered like the bones of some dead thing. But there was a strange beauty to the decay, the remnants of a once regal life now surrendered to time. They made camp in what had been the grand hall, laying their sleeping bags in a rough square near the stone hearth. The ceilings stretched high above them, lost in shadow. Jamie filmed it all, occasionally pausing to take pictures of the ornate carvings and moldy portraits still clinging to the walls. By the time night fell, a wind had picked up, whispering through the broken windows like distant voices. They lit a small camp stove for warmth and huddled around it, telling stories to pass the time. That portrait, Jamie said, pointing her flashlight at a large, dust-covered painting over the fireplace. It's weird, right? Her eyes look too real. The woman in the painting was dressed in old Victorian mourning clothes, her pale face gaunt, her eyes enormous and glassy. Rachel shivered. I read something once about how the Dorsham matriarch went mad after her children drowned in the lake out back. She kept their rooms exactly the same, would sit in them for hours, talking to them like they were still alive. Sounds about right, Liam muttered. This place has trauma written all over it. Taylor shook their head. Urban legend. I looked it up. There's no record of a drowning, just rumors from the 1930s. The wind howled suddenly, rattling the broken window panes. Then, without warning, all 4 of their phones died at once. Every single one. What the hell? Taylor said, pressing their power button. Nothing. Jamie tried hers too. No battery symbol, just black screens. That's not normal, Rachel whispered. Liam forced a laugh. What, you think Ghost Lady short-circuited our tech? Come on. Then came the sound. It was faint at first, like the creaking of floorboards far above them. A soft step, then another, slow and deliberate. They all froze. "There's someone upstairs," Jamie whispered, camera still in her lap. They listened. The footsteps continued, unhurried, pacing, turning, and then stopping directly above them. Midnight. Rachel glanced at her wristwatch. It had stopped ticking at exactly 12 o'clock. Part 2. The first night. The silence that followed the stopped watch ticked louder than any noise. Rachel slowly rose to her feet. "Okay," she whispered. "We're probably not alone in here." "No kidding," Liam muttered, pulling a rusted fireplace poker from the nearby wall bracket. "If this is some junky squatter situation, we can handle it." Taylor clicked their flashlight back on, sweeping the beam toward the stairwell. The shadows seemed to resist it, pulling in like fog instead of scattering. "Let's not just go running toward the sound," Jamie said. She turned her camera off, but still gripped it like a weapon. "It could be dangerous," Rachel pointed to the stairs. "We go together, quiet, just to see if someone's up there. Then we get back to camp and lock the door." "If there's a door left to lock," Taylor muttered. Step by step, they ascended the grand staircase. The banister was covered in a thick coat of dust and mold. The wood beneath splintered and soft. Every step creaked, loud as gunshots in the stillness. But the sound from above had stopped. They reached the landing. Cold air pushed against them from the dark hallway ahead. The house seemed to stretch impossibly far now, with doors on either side like a hotel. Rachel turned to the others. "This place is bigger than it looked." Then a sudden slam. A door down the hall snapped shut, the echo booming through the mansion like a gunshot. Jamie gasped, spinning to catch it on camera, but the hallway was still. Nothing moved, no footsteps, just silence. "I've had enough," Liam said, gripping the fireplace poker tighter. "Let's head back down and block the doors. If someone's messing with us, they're not getting in tonight." But as they turned, the hallway behind them had changed. There was no stairwell, no landing, only more hallway. Liam froze. "Wait, what the—" Rachel turned in a slow circle, shining her phone's dead screen like a lantern. "We came from there. The stairs were right there." Taylor pressed their hand to the wall. "Number, no. This is wrong. We didn't turn. We didn't move that far." Jamie's voice shook. "The house is changing." Then came a whisper, so faint it might have been the wind or the floorboards settling, but it carried through the corridor clearly. "Why are you in my house?" They all heard it. Rachel's blood ran cold. "Run." They didn't argue. The hallway stretched unnaturally as they ran, every door identical, every turn leading to another shadowed corridor. The walls pulsed with mildew, the air thick and sour. Their lights flickered and spat static. Finally, they burst through a heavy door that slammed behind them, sending clouds of dust into the air. They were back in the grand hall. The sleeping bags were still there. The stove, untouched. The stairwell behind them stood where it should be. No hallway, no infinite doors. Rachel collapsed to her knees, gasping. "What the hell is this place?" Liam asked, pacing, hands in his hair. Taylor sat down hard on their sleeping bag. "We didn't turn. That hallway, it wasn't physically possible." "Did anyone else hear her?" Jamie asked. "That voice? She asked us, 'Why are you in my house?'" No one replied, because they'd all heard her. They decided not to sleep. Not that any of them could. Rachel kept watch by the stairwell while Liam rigged a makeshift barricade against the double doors of the grand hall. Taylor tried reasoning through what had happened, talking aloud, explaining the possibility of hallucination, of shared psychological stress. But even they couldn't rationalize what they'd seen. Jamie sat by the fire with her camera. She played back the footage she'd recorded before the phones had died. The recording showed the group entering the mansion, laughing, unpacking gear, joking about ghosts. Then came the moment Rachel had pointed out the painting. Jamie's fingers slowed. On screen, in the moment just before Rachel spoke, there was someone standing at the top of the stairs, a pale woman in dark clothing, motionless. By the time the camera panned again, she was gone. Jamie looked up, pale. "There was someone," she whispered. "She was watching us before we even heard the footsteps." She turned the screen so the others could see. Rachel leaned in, her face blank. Liam stopped moving. Taylor was silent. They watched the video 5 times, and every time the figure was there, unmoving, watching. Midnight passed again. The wind picked up, whispering through the beams and broken glass, but the footsteps did not return. At around 3 a.m., Rachel finally nodded off, curled in her sleeping bag near the hearth. The others followed gradually, sleep pulling at them like a drug. Jamie was the last awake. She kept the camera close and her eyes on the stairwell. She'd made it a habit, counting heartbeats, then blinking. She did this to stay calm, to stay aware, until she blinked once, and the woman from the recording was standing at the bottom of the stairs. Just standing, watching. Jamie gasped and scrambled back, knocking over her camera. When she looked again, the woman was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just the howling wind and the dim orange glow of their camp stove. She didn't sleep. Part 3. The lake. They left the house at sunrise. None of them said it aloud, but they all felt the same fear. Something in the house didn't want them there. And last night, it had started to show itself. "Let's just explore the grounds," Rachel said, forcing a smile. "Get some air, maybe by the lake. Then we can decide what to do next." The lake behind the mansion sat still and glassy, the morning mist curling off it in tendrils. There was a broken dock stretching halfway out into the water, and what looked like the remains of a gazebo sunk into the far bank. "Creepy as hell," Liam muttered, looking over the still surface. "Why is it always lakes in ghost stories?" Jamie said nothing. She kept her camera trained on the house behind them. She zoomed in on the topmost window. A pale figure stood there. "You guys." But when she looked again, the window was empty. Rachel dipped her fingers in the water. "It's freezing." Taylor crouched nearby, scanning the overgrown yard. "I think the legend about the drowned kids came from this lake." "Do you believe it now?" Liam asked. "After last night?" Taylor hesitated. "I think something happened here. Maybe not what the legends say, but something." They followed a narrow path around the far edge of the lake, pushing through thorn-choked hedges and ducking under low branches. Eventually, they found what looked like a family cemetery, small, fenced, overgrown with vines. Most of the gravestones were unreadable, names worn to dust, all except one. Elizabeth Dorsham, beloved mother, taken by grief, returned at midnight. Rachel read it aloud, then whispered, "Returned at midnight?" Jamie backed away. "We need to leave, tonight." Liam looked around. "You want to hike miles through the woods without signal after dark?" Rachel shook her head. "We wait until morning. Pack up before dark. Just one more night," Jamie whispered. "She comes at midnight." Part 4. Marked. That evening, the house seemed darker than before. Not from the fading light, but from something deeper, something within the walls. As they entered, the air grew heavy again. It was like walking into a tomb. They cooked quietly, ate quickly, and barely spoke. At some point, Taylor approached Jamie, voice low. "Do you remember the portrait?" they asked. "Above the fireplace." Jamie nodded. "Hard to forget." Taylor hesitated. Her eyes. "They looked different this morning. I checked them again when we got back." "What do you mean?" "They were looking at us." Jamie's stomach sank. She turned to the hearth. The woman in the painting, Elizabeth Dorsham, was still there. but now her head was tilted slightly, and her pale eyes locked with Jamie's, even across the room. Jamie stepped back. No, we're imagining this. Taylor shook their head. It's her. She's not just in the hallway, she's watching through the painting. Jamie checked her camera again, replayed footage from the night before. Pause. Zoom. In one frame, captured mid-flash from the stairwell, Elizabeth's portrait had no eyes, only dark, empty sockets. Part 5. Possession hour. They agreed to keep a fire going and take shifts staying awake. No one argued this time. Liam took first watch. Rachel, exhausted, passed out almost instantly. Jamie tried to rest but couldn't stop staring at the doorway. The shadows seemed to breathe. At 11:42 p.m., Liam thought he saw movement by the far window. He stood slowly, poker in hand. Then he heard it again. Thump. A soft step. Then another. The sound wasn't coming from the stairs. It came from inside the room. Liam spun toward the hearth. Elizabeth Dorsham was standing beside the portrait of herself. Her skin was pale and stretched like damp parchment, and her hands hung unnaturally low. Her mouth was too wide, open in a silent scream. Her eyes, oh God, her eyes were gone, but she was looking through him. He couldn't move. He couldn't scream. She raised one long, skeletal finger and pointed to him, then to the others sleeping, then to the painting. Then she vanished. Liam collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Jamie awoke first. She found Liam on the ground, shaking, lips bloodless. His eyes were open but vacant, like he'd stared too long into something incomprehensible. "I saw her," he whispered hoarsely. "She's real. She wants to finish what she started." Rachel stirred. "What happened?" "She pointed at the portrait," Jamie said. "Why?" Taylor approached the painting and stared up at it. I think it's a doorway. Not literal, but spiritual. Maybe emotional. She's in it. Or behind it." "Behind what?" Rachel asked. "The grief," Taylor said. "That grave said she returned at midnight. Maybe not her body. Maybe her soul. Every night at midnight, she comes back." Jamie's camera beeped. Its battery had returned. She lifted it slowly, checked the display. The recording was on, but she hadn't turned it on. The screen flickered. The playback began. From inside the house, a view from the ceiling looking down on them, recorded from a place no one could have reached. The image glitched. Elizabeth's face appeared on the screen, lips twitching. A whisper played. "You're mine now." Part 6. The final hour. "We have to destroy the painting," Rachel said. Jamie nodded. "She's linked to it." "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Taylor warned. "If she's trapped in it, breaking it might set her free." "We're past safe bets," Rachel said. "If she can watch us through it, she's already here." They gathered what they could: matches, broken chair legs for kindling, and lighter fluid from a lantern kit. The plan was simple. Light the portrait. Burn it. The wind howled as if in protest, rattling what remained of the cracked windows. The house seemed to breathe with them, its aging timbers groaning under an unseen weight. The portrait loomed over the hearth, Elizabeth Dorsham's painted eyes tracking them, no matter where they stood in the room. Rachel stood closest, clutching the can of lighter fluid with both hands. "She's inside that thing," Jamie whispered, backing away with her camera. "Watching. Waiting." Taylor scanned the floor nervously. "We do this, and there's no telling what we're unleashing." Rachel struck a match. The tiny flame flickered, casting harsh orange across her pale face. Or ending. Without another word, she doused the portrait. The lighter fluid soaked the frame, the canvas darkening in quick, jagged lines like spreading veins. Elizabeth's painted face seemed to distort as it absorbed the oil, her mouth curling into something too wide, something that hadn't been there before. "Now," Rachel hissed, striking another match and tossing it forward. Flame met fluid. The portrait ignited in a whoosh of angry fire. For a moment, all was silent, just crackling wood and snapping canvas. Then the screaming began. Not from a throat, not from the fire, from every wall. The house shrieked. The floor buckled beneath them as if recoiling from the flame. The flames turned an eerie blue, licking up the wall, burning cold. Elizabeth's image writhed in the fire like she was alive, as though the canvas were flesh and not oil paint. "Back! Back!" Taylor shouted, pulling Jamie and Liam away. Rachel stood her ground, watching it burn. But then, the fire stopped. The entire room went dark. The house went silent. The portrait was gone, not burned to ash, not blackened, just gone. The wall above the fireplace now bore only a massive cracked space, the plaster beneath blistered and weeping black tar. And in that moment, a new sound began, a dragging noise. Step, drag, step, drag, from the upper floor. No one moved. "Please tell me that's not," Liam started. Thump. From the stairs, slow, purposeful. They all turned at once, eyes fixed on the grand staircase. Elizabeth was descending, no longer a painting, no longer just a shadow. Her dress trailed behind her like a funeral shroud soaked in water. Her arms hung limp at her sides, skin translucent and stretched too tightly over long, grasping fingers. Her eyes were still hollow, black, endless pits, but they dripped now. Not tears, but ink. A constant ooze that painted the steps with each blink. She had been freed. Taylor backed up, voice shaking. "We released her." "No," Jamie whispered. "We woke her up." Part 7. Binding. Elizabeth reached the bottom of the stairs, her feet not quite touching the ground. The room temperature dropped instantly, their breath hanging in the air in frozen plumes. She opened her mouth. From it came the sound of children crying. All of them dropped to their knees, hands pressed to their ears as the sound filled their skulls like nails hammered into bone. It wasn't just noise, it was grief, weaponized, unbearable. Jamie screamed through the pain. "We have to finish it. We have to bind her." "How?" Rachel shouted, eyes wide. Jamie fumbled in her bag, pulling out her grandfather's journal, the one she had borrowed for the project. He'd researched the Dorsham family before disappearing himself decades ago. The journal mentioned Elizabeth's obsession with mirrors, with reflection, with image. She's not tied to the painting. She's tied to representation. Anything that shows her, we can trap her again. Mirror, lens, glass. Taylor pointed to Jamie's camera. "Use it. Take her picture." Jamie raised the camera with shaking hands. Elizabeth floated closer. Snap! The flash hit her full in the face. She shrieked. The room buckled. Snap! The second flash made her stagger. Rachel grabbed the remaining lighter fluid and poured it in a circle around them. "We trap her in the lens, just like the painting." Snap! The third flash sent Elizabeth stumbling back, her form flickering, breaking apart like shattered porcelain. Jamie backed toward the hearth. "We need something old, something reflective, something anchored." Taylor's eyes lit up. The silver mirror, upstairs, the nursery. They ran, dodging Elizabeth's outstretched arms as she lunged, screaming in tongues no human throat should speak. They burst through the second-floor corridor as the house twisted around them, rooms reshaping, ceilings lowering like jaws. They reached the nursery. At the far end, the antique silver mirror, once belonging to the Dorsham matriarch. Jamie ran to it, heart pounding. "I need time," she said. "I need to set up the shot. The camera has to catch her reflection and trap it. It's the only way." Rachel and Taylor stood at the door. Liam, pale and sweating, handed her the memory card. Make it count. Then Elizabeth arrived. The walls bent inward, the crib splintered. The shadows turned to hands. Rachel and Taylor lit makeshift torches from crib legs and rags. They fought back the crawling dark, buying Jamie seconds. One shot. That's all she'd get. Jamie crouched low, breathing shallow. She angled the mirror, set her camera to burst. Elizabeth surged into the room. Jamie hit the shutter. Flash, flash, flash. Elizabeth screamed. Her form contorted, pulled backward, sucked into the reflection like oil down a drain. The mirror cracked once, then again, then it shattered. The light went white. Epilogue, morning light. They woke in the woods, no mansion behind them, only ash and mist. Liam sat up first, bleeding from his ear. Taylor was unconscious but breathing. Rachel had burn marks across her arms. Jamie's camera lay beside her. The memory card was full, but only one image showed up. Elizabeth Dorsham, her eyes filled with regret and peace. The camera shorted out a second later. Fried from the inside. They never spoke about the night again. The townspeople didn't ask, because no one remembered the mansion ever being there, except them, and maybe the children. Sometimes on foggy nights you can still hear them laughing. Sometimes just before midnight people swear they see a tall, pale woman in the reflection of their bedroom mirrors, watching, waiting. The house on Wicker Hill. The real estate agent called it a hidden gem, a fixer-upper with history. But to Thomas and Elaine Mercer, it was something far more alluring. A fresh start. After Thomas's redundancy from the university and Elaine's mental health battle following the stillbirth of their second child, life in the city had begun to rot around the edges. So when they stumbled across the listing for the old colonial-style home nestled in the dense woods of upstate Vermont, they took it as a sign. It was cheap, suspiciously cheap, but desperation has a way of silencing doubt. Wicker Hill House stood proudly at the end of a winding gravel road, shrouded in trees so thick they blotted out the sun after 4 p.m. The place had been abandoned for nearly 20 years, its paint peeled like shedding skin, and its porch sagged as though sighing under the weight of years. But Elaine saw beauty in it. "It has bones," she said the first time they stood on the porch. "Yeah," Thomas replied. "I just hope they're not human." They laughed, the kind of laugh that tries to keep darkness at bay. Day one, the whisper in the mirror. Moving in was easy. There was no one around to complain about noise, and their daughter, Lily, age 7, ran wild through the overgrown backyard with a glee they hadn't seen in months. For a while, things felt good. The first odd thing happened that night. Elaine stood brushing her teeth in the upstairs bathroom when the mirror fogged over. That wasn't unusual, except the water wasn't hot. In fact, the pipes hadn't even been connected yet. She wiped the glass and stared at her reflection. For a split second, she thought the reflection lagged behind. Her mouth moved slightly after she stopped. Then something flickered across the mirror. Not a reflection, but a shadow inside the glass. A figure, thin, tall, standing just behind her, though no one was in the room. She spun around. Nothing. She didn't tell Thomas. Day 3. The locked door. The house had 5 bedrooms. One was sealed, not with a lock, but with iron nails, driven crudely into the door frame from top to bottom. It looked like someone had tried to keep something in, not out. Thomas found it while exploring the attic. The door had no knob, just a keyhole, ancient and rusted. "I'm not opening it," Elaine said. "That's not ours to open." Thomas laughed. "It's exactly ours to open. We own the house now." Still, he waited. Something about it felt wrong, as if the house itself wanted it left alone. That night, Thomas heard scratching behind the door, light, almost like fingertips. When he pressed his ear to it, the sound stopped. and something breathed on the other side. Day 5. The thing in the walls. Lily began complaining about the tapping. Thomas and Elaine dismissed it as mice, or the old wood shifting with the wind. But the tapping wasn't random. It came in patterns. 3 knocks, then 2, then a pause, then 5. Morse code, maybe. One night, Thomas knocked back. 3, 2, pause, 5, silence. Then a slow reply. 5, 1, 1, 1. He looked it up the next morning. KILL, day 7. The journal. Elaine found the journal beneath a floorboard in the nursery. It belonged to a woman named Annalise Crowhurst, who had lived in the house in 1894. The entries began sane. Musings on the garden, the bird song, her husband's slow descent into melancholy. But over time, the words changed. He stares at the wall now, always the west wall. He says she's inside it, waiting. Last night I heard someone singing through the drain, a little girl's voice. But we have no children. I nailed the door shut. She keeps knocking. She wants to be let out. Elaine read the journal in full. Then she read it again. That night she heard Lily humming a tune in her sleep, the same tune written in the margin of Annalise's final entry. Day 10. The girl in the garden. Lily made a friend. A girl in a white dress, she said. She's sad. She lives in the garden. Elaine tried to stay calm. Imaginary friends were normal. But when she asked Lily for more details, her daughter whispered, "She says she used to live in the walls." They followed her out back to the old stone well. The rope had long since rotted away. Vines crept around the stone like fingers trying to keep something sealed. "She sleeps down there now," Lily said. Thomas stared into the darkness of the well. Something stared back. Day 12. Opening the door. The scratching had grown louder. No longer fingernails, but claws. Thomas couldn't take it anymore. Armed with a crowbar, he pried the nails loose. Elaine begged him to stop, her voice rising in panic. "It's just a room," he snapped. "There's nothing behind it." The door groaned open. Inside was a child's bedroom, untouched by time. Toys, a wooden rocking horse, a dollhouse shaped exactly like Wicker Hill House. On the wall, a child's drawing, a house, a smiling family, and something black towering behind them. Then the smell hit him, rot, mold, and old iron. There was no light, but in the far corner, something moved. He slammed the door and nailed it shut again. But something on the other side began to laugh, a high-pitched hollow giggle that followed him down the stairs. Day 14. Elaine's dream. She dreamt she was buried alive, cold soil pressing down on her, unable to scream. The earth shifted and she opened her mouth, only to find it full of worms. When she woke, she had dirt under her fingernails and a bruise shaped like a small hand on her shoulder. Thomas didn't believe her, or maybe he just didn't want to. The house creaked with every breath. The windows no longer showed the outside world, they reflected something else. A forest burned in one, the sea raged in another. In one, a noose swung gently in an unseen breeze. Day 17. The crawl space. A smell filled the house, sour, metallic. Thomas followed it to the basement. Behind a loose panel, he found a crawl space, thick with cobwebs and bones. Animal bones, mostly. One skeleton was small, human, wearing a white dress. The girl in the garden. Then the lights went out, and in the pitch-black silence he heard the sound of breathing behind him. Slow, wet, hungry. He ran. Something followed, scraping nails along the wall as it gave chase. When he reached the stairs, the door slammed shut on its own. He clawed it open. The breathing stopped. But when he turned back, there was a small white handprint on his shirt. Day 20. The truth. Elaine finished the journal. The final entry read, "She is not a ghost. She is a wound, a memory the house refuses to forget. We tried to bury her, but she always finds her way back. If if you found this, it's too late. She has already chosen you. That night, Lily went missing. They found her in the locked room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, eyes rolled back. She told me her name, she whispered. Elaine knelt. Who, baby? The girl, the one who lives in the walls. Thomas asked. What did she say her name was? Lily blinked. Annalise. Elaine's blood turned to ice. That was the woman who wrote the journal. No, Lily replied. That's the name she took. The girl is still here. Then she began to scream. Day 21. Fire. They tried to leave. The car wouldn't start. Phones had long since died. Every road out looped back to the house. The house wanted them. That night they set fire to it. Gasoline, matches, a desperate prayer. Flames swallowed the walls. Screams rose from the foundation. Dozens of voices shrieking in unison. Faces appeared in the windows. Children, men. A woman with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't end. But as the roof caved in and the night sky opened above them, Elaine saw her, in the garden, unburnt, watching. The girl in white, still waiting, still smiling. They never found the Mercers' bodies, just ash and the well, always the well. The house was rebuilt 10 years later. It's listed again now. Charming countryside estate on Wicker Hill, a hidden gem with a rich past. Interested? You've already heard the knocking.